Then explain how a 1964 Jefferson nickel, a coin most people wouldn't even bother picking up off the ground, has been tied to value soaring into the hundreds of thousands, even whispered about in the millions under the rarest circumstances. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Millions of these coins are still out there, sitting in jars, hidden in drawers, passing through hands every single day, because tonight, you're about to see this ordinary nickel in a way you never have before. And once you do, you'll never look at your spare change the same way again. Let's start with what makes the 1964 Jefferson nickel so deceptively ordinary. In 1964, the United States Mint produced over 2.8 billion nickels. That's billion, with a B. Philadelphia alone struck a massive portion of them, and unlike some other years, these coins carry no mint mark. No D. No S. Just a plain, unassuming design. Thomas Jefferson on the front, Monticello on the back. That's exactly what makes it so dangerous, because hidden inside that ocean of ordinary coins are anomalies, tiny deviations, microscopic mistakes, and rare production quirks that can transform 5 cents into a collector's obsession, and in some cases, a life-changing discovery. But here's where things take a turn. Not every 1964 nickel is valuable. In fact, most are worth exactly what you'd expect, 5 cents. The answer lies in the details most people never notice. Let me ask you something, because collectors know something the average person doesn't. The smallest imperfections can carry the biggest price tags. Take the elusive full steps nickel. On the reverse side of the coin, beneath Monticello, there are steps, tiny horizontal lines that represent the building's entrance. On most coins, these steps are weak, worn, or incomplete, but on rare examples, every single step is fully visible, sharply defined. These are known as full steps nickels, and they are prized because achieving that level of detail required perfect striking conditions, something incredibly rare during the high-speed production frenzy of 1964. Now here's where it gets interesting. A 1964 nickel with full steps, in pristine, high-grade condition, has been known to fetch staggering amounts at auction. We're not talking a few $100s. We're talking tens of thousands. And in elite cases, when combined with other factors like flawless surfaces and exceptional luster, prices have climbed into the six-figure range. In fact, one top-condition specimen has been reported to reach as high as $753,000 from pocket change to nearly $750,000, all because of a few tiny lines most people would never even notice. But full steps are just the beginning, because the real story lies in the errors. Mint errors are where things get truly unpredictable and incredibly valuable. Imagine a coin that was struck twice, slightly off-center. Or a coin where the design appears doubled, as if it's vibrating. Or even a coin struck with a misaligned die, creating a distorted image that was never meant to exist. These aren't defects to collectors. They're treasures. Take the double die effect. On certain 1964 nickels, you can find subtle doubling in the lettering or details, particularly in God We Trust, or the date itself. To the untrained eye, it might look like it's a red flag in the best possible way, because true double dies are rare, and rare means valuable. Then, there are off-center strikes, coins that miss their alignment during production. Depending on how dramatic the misalignment is, these can command impressive premiums. But here's the twist most people don't expect. The more unusual the error, the more collectors want it. Think about that. In most areas of life, perfection is the goal, imperfection is king, and the 1964 Jefferson nickel is a perfect storm for these kinds of anomalies. Because 1964 was a year of chaos at the U.S. Mint. Coin shortages were sweeping the nation. Demand was exploding. The Mint was under immense pressure to produce coins faster than ever before. Machines ran longer. Dies wore out quicker. Quality control slipped, And in that environment, mistakes happened. Lots of them. Most were caught and destroyed. They escaped. And those are the coins collectors dream about. Coins that were never supposed to exist. Coins that slipped through the cracks. Coins that could be sitting in your home right now. But here's where the story takes another turn, and this is where many people get it wrong. Condition is everything. You could have a rare variety, a genuine error, even a full steps nickel. Its value drops dramatically. On the other hand, a perfectly preserved coin, one that looks almost exactly as it did the day it left the mint, can multiply in value exponentially. We're talking about grading levels like MS65, MS66, even MS67. These aren't just numbers. They're gateways to serious money. Because at the highest grades, rarity explodes. There might be thousands of 1964 nickels, but only a handful in near perfect condition. Prices skyrocket. It's simple supply and demand, but at an extreme level. Now here's the part that should make you pause. It happens more often than you think, and that's what makes this so compelling. Because unlike rare paintings locked away in museums, or million-dollar cars hidden in private collections, coins circulate. They move. They travel. They pass from hand to hand, unnoticed. Which means the next great discovery isn't locked away somewhere. It's out there, right now, maybe in your change jar, maybe in your wallet, maybe sitting in a drawer you haven't opened in years, and all it takes is one careful look. One moment of curiosity. One decision to check instead of ignore. Because the difference between 5 cents and a life-changing find is knowledge, knowing what to look for, knowing what others miss, and acting before it's too late. So here's what you do. Next time you come across a 1964 Jefferson nickel, don't dismiss it. Hold it up to the light. Examine the steps on Monticello. Look closely at the lettering. Search for doubling, misalignment, or anything that feels just slightly off. They could mean everything. And remember this, every great coin discovery started the same way. Someone took a second look. So the real question isn't whether these coins exist. We already know they do. The real question is, your next coin could be worth 5 cents. But what if I told you that one specific version of that coin, the 1970 Jefferson Nickel, has been quietly hiding secrets for decades? Secrets that have turned loose change into life-changing money. We're not talking about a few $100s. We're talking about values that have shocked collectors, whispers of coins reaching into the hundreds of thousands, even approaching the realm of $1 million under the right conditions. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Some of these coins are still out there, hiding in plain sight. The story begins in 1970 at the Denver Mint. Millions of Jefferson Nickels were struck that year, each bearing the small D mint mark beside Monticello. On the surface, nothing unusual. Just another year, another coin, another piece of everyday currency. But beneath that normal appearance, something went wrong. Or maybe, something went incredibly right. Because within that massive production run, a handful of nickels emerged with subtle, almost invisible differences. Tiny imperfections. Strange anomalies. Details so easy to miss that most people spent them without a second thought. Collectors, however, saw something else. They saw opportunity. One of the most intriguing aspects of the 1970 nickel lies in its errors and varieties. Those microscopic deviations that can transform a 5-cent coin into a collector's dream. We're talking about double dies, repunched mint marks, and striking anomalies that most people would never notice unless they knew exactly where to look. And that's where the suspense begins. Because once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. Imagine holding a 1970 nickel under a light. You tilt it slightly. You look closer at the lettering. Liberty, in God we trust. At first glance, everything seems normal. But then, something catches your eye. A faint doubling. A shadow-like echo in the letters. A subtle shift in the design that shouldn't be there. That single detail, barely visible to the naked eye, can be the difference between 5 cents and thousands of dollars. Far, far more. Now here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Condition. Because in the world of coin collecting, condition isn't just important, it's everything. A worn 1970 nickel might still be interesting, but it won't command life-changing money. But a coin preserved in near-perfect condition? One that has never been circulated, one that still holds its original mint luster? That's where things get serious. Collectors use a grading scale, and at the very top sits a near-mythical level, mint state 67, 68, even 69. Coins at this level are extraordinarily rare. We're talking about pieces that look as if they were struck yesterday, untouched by time, untouched by human hands. That's when the numbers start to climb. Auction records have stunned even seasoned collectors. Reports have surfaced of top-condition examples reaching extraordinary prices, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in some cases, jaw-dropping figures like $853,000 for a coin that checks every box. Flawless condition, sharp strike, and rare characteristics. Let that sink in. $853,000 for a nickel. 5 cents, transformed into a fortune. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, because here's the uncomfortable truth: most people never even look. They assume all coins are the same. They assume value is obvious. They assume that if something were truly valuable, they would already know. But history has proven that assumption is wrong. Again and again, rare coins have surfaced in the most ordinary places. Pocket change, old jars, inherited collections, forgotten drawers, and the 1970 Jefferson Nickel is no exception. In fact, it might be one of the most overlooked opportunities still circulating in the shadows of everyday life. But there's another twist. Not every valuable 1970 nickel screams for attention. Some of the most desirable pieces are defined not by dramatic flaws, but by subtle perfection. A sharper strike, a cleaner surface, a deeper luster. These are the coins that quietly rise through the ranks, the ones that professional graders recognize instantly, the ones that command premium prices when they finally hit the market. Collectors compete because they know how rare they truly are. Now imagine this scenario. You're going through an old coin jar. Maybe it belonged to a parent or a grandparent. You're not expecting anything special, just loose change. But then you spot a small D beneath a year. Your heart skips a beat. You remember hearing something about this coin. Something about rare versions, high values, hidden errors. So you take a closer look, because here's the reality. Most people will never check. They'll spend it, ignore it, overlook it. But a small number of people, the ones who pay attention, the ones who stay curious, those are the ones who find the treasures. And that's what makes this story so powerful. It's not just about a coin. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing that value isn't always obvious, that opportunity doesn't always announce itself, and that sometimes the smallest things can carry the greatest potential. The 1970 Jefferson Nickel is a perfect example of that truth. A coin born in mass production, yet capable of standing out in extraordinary ways. A coin that most people ignore, yet collectors quietly hunt for. A coin that, under the right circumstances, has reached values that defy logic and challenge everything we think we know about money. Right now. In this moment, maybe you have a jar of coins sitting somewhere in your home. Maybe you've inherited a collection you've never fully explored. Maybe you've simply never thought to look. But now you know. Now you understand that even something as ordinary as a nickel can hold secrets. Now you know what to watch for: the year, the mint mark, the condition, the subtle signs of something unusual. And once you know, you can't go back. Because every coin you see from this point forward carries a question. That's the allure of coin collecting. That's the thrill, the possibility, the chance that something ordinary can become extraordinary in an instant. It stands as a quiet reminder of that possibility. And what if, under the right conditions, it could be worth not just hundreds, not just thousands, but tens of thousands of dollars, with whispers in the collecting world of extraordinary examples commanding staggering prices? Because the truth is this: the 1971 no-mint mark Jefferson Nickel is not what most people think it is, and once you understand why, you may never look at your spare change the same way again. The year was 1971. America was in transition. The Vietnam War raged on. The dollar was about to be untethered from gold. And in the background, quietly, mechanically, the U.S. Mint struck hundreds of millions of Jefferson Nickels in Philadelphia. Back then, Philadelphia coins didn't carry a mint mark. No P. No identifier. Just a clean, unmarked field beside Jefferson's portrait. So at first glance, a 1971 nickel without a mint mark is completely normal. Expected, even. Which is exactly why the rare ones slip through unnoticed. Because the value isn't in the date alone. It's in the details. Tiny, nearly invisible details that most people never think to check. Because on the 1971 Jefferson nickel, the difference between face value and a serious payday can come down to a single subtle imperfection. Or a perfect strike. Or a microscopic doubling you can only see under magnification. And that's where things start to get interesting. You see, while millions of these nickels were made, only a small fraction were struck with the kind of precision collectors call full steps. Now, that might sound insignificant, but it changes everything. On the reverse of the coin, beneath Monticello, there are steps, tiny horizontal lines that represent the building staircase. On most nickels, those steps are weak, blurred, or incomplete due to worn dies or imperfect strikes. But on rare occasions, everything aligns perfectly. The pressure, the die condition, the metal flow, and when it does, those steps appear sharp, crisp, and fully defined. Collectors call this the full steps designation, and it's one of the most sought-after traits in Jefferson Nickels, because it's incredibly hard to find. And when rarity meets demand, prices don't just rise. They explode. In top-tier condition, certified by professional grading services, a 1971 no-mint mark nickel with full steps can command thousands of dollars. Thousands. For a coin most people wouldn't pick up off the ground. But that's just the beginning. Because full steps isn't the only secret hiding in these coins. There's something else. Something even more elusive. Errors. Mint errors are the wild cards of coin collecting. They're not supposed to exist. They slip through the cracks, tiny mechanical mishaps that somehow escape quality control. And when they do, they create one-of-a-kind treasures. On the 1971 Jefferson Nickel, several types of errors have been reported over the years. Doubled dies, where design elements appear slightly duplicated, as if the coin has a shadow. Off-center strikes, where the design is misaligned, leaving part of the coin blank. Clipped planchets, where a portion of the coin is literally missing due to a cutting error. Die cracks, raised lines that snake across the surface like lightning frozen in metal. Each one tells a story, each one is unique, and each one can multiply the coin's value dramatically. Now here's where the suspense deepens, because not all errors are obvious. Some are subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. A slight doubling in the lettering. A faint shift in the date. A barely noticeable distortion in Jefferson's profile. And that raises a dangerous question. Think about that. It's a chilling thought. Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary often comes down to awareness. And once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. But let's go deeper. Condition. In coin collecting, condition is everything. Two identical coins can have wildly different values based on how well they've been preserved. Scratches, wear, loss of detail, all of it chips away at value. But a coin that's been protected, untouched by circulation, with its original luster intact, That's a different story entirely. These are known as mint state coins, graded on a scale from 1 to 70. And when you get into the upper range, MS65, MS66, MS67, that's where things become truly rare. For a 1971 no mint mark nickel, reaching those levels is extremely difficult, because most of them were used, handled, worn down over time. Finding one in pristine condition today is like finding a time capsule, and when you combine high grade with full steps or a significant error, you're no longer talking about pocket change. You're talking about a serious collector's prize. Now, you may have heard stories, headline-grabbing claims of coins selling for staggering amounts, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in exceptional cases across the broader coin market. And while not every 1971 nickel reaches those heights, the principle remains the same: rarity plus condition plus demand equals value, and sometimes extraordinary value. But here's the twist: most people will never check. They'll assume their coins are worthless. They'll ignore the possibility entirely. And that's exactly why opportunities like this still exist, because the market doesn't reward the unaware. It rewards the curious, the observant, the ones willing to look a little closer. So here's the moment of truth. Imagine this: you go to your drawer, you grab a handful of coins, you start sorting pennies, quarters, dimes, and then you see a nickel, an O mint mark. At first, it looks like all the others, but now you know better. You tilt it under the light, you examine the steps on Monticello, you check the lettering. Your heart starts to beat a little faster, because for the first time, you're not just looking at a coin. You're investigating it. And in that moment, something shifts. You realize that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Sometimes it waits, quietly, for someone to notice. Because somewhere in America, an ordinary-looking 1972 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark has sparked rumors, headlines, and jaw-dropping claims. Numbers that climb into the hundreds of thousands, even whispers of values approaching $1 million. That's exactly what most people thought, until they started looking closer. And tonight, you're going to see why this tiny coin has captured the imagination of collectors across the country, and why ignoring it could mean overlooking something extraordinary. Let's start with a detail almost everyone misses: the missing mint mark. In 1972, Jefferson Nickels were struck at two primary mints, Philadelphia and Denver. Denver coins carry a small D mint mark on the reverse side, next to Monticello. Philadelphia coins? At the time, they didn't use a mint mark at all. So at first glance, a 1972 nickel with no mint mark seems completely normal, common, ordinary, forgettable. But here's where things start to shift, because in coin collecting, normal is often where the rarest secrets hide, and more importantly, the real value of a 1972 no mint mark Jefferson nickel doesn't come from the missing mint mark itself. It comes from something far more elusive: errors and condition. And that's where the story takes a sharp turn, because not all coins are created equal, even when they look identical. Some were struck with misaligned dies. Others carry faint doubling in the lettering. Some show unusual surface textures, weak strikes, or tiny anomalies that only trained eyes, or a magnifying glass, can detect. They can change everything. Imagine holding two nickels side by side. Same year, same design, same missing mint mark. One is worth 5 cents. The other could be worth hundreds, maybe thousands, because collectors don't just pay for coins. They pay for rarity, condition, and the story behind the piece. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where things get serious. Most 1972 nickels spent decades in circulation. They passed through vending machines, cash registers, pockets, and hands. They picked up scratches, nicks, and wear along the way, but a tiny fraction escaped that fate. They remained pristine, untouched, sharp in detail, gleaming as if time forgot them. In the coin world, this is called mint state. And when a coin reaches the highest levels, graded MS65, MS66, or beyond, it enters an entirely different category. A different market. A different price bracket. Now here's where things get interesting. There have been verified auction sales of high-grade Jefferson Nickels, some from the early 1970s, reaching thousands of dollars. In rare cases, exceptional coins with near-perfect preservation and strong eye appeal have commanded even higher premiums. And then come the rumors. Stories circulate online of a 1972 no-mint marked nickel fetching staggering amounts, figures like $860,000 or more. Numbers that sound almost unreal. But here's the truth you need to hear. While those extreme price claims are often exaggerated or misunderstood, they aren't completely born out of thin air. They usually stem from confusion with other rare coins, misreported auction results, or hypothetical valuations of perfect specimens that almost never exist. So no, most 1972 nickels won't make you a millionaire, but that doesn't mean yours is worthless, because the real opportunity lies in understanding what separates the ordinary from the exceptional. Let's break it down. First, look at the strike quality. Are Jefferson's hair details sharp and defined, or do they appear soft and flat? Strong strikes are more desirable. Second, check for luster. Does the coin reflect light with a smooth, almost cartwheel-like shine? That's a sign of minimal wear. Third, inspect for marks. Fewer scratches and contact marks mean higher grades and higher value. And then, look closer. Do you see doubling in the letters? Slight shadows around Liberty or the date. That could indicate a double die variety, a subtle error that collectors actively hunt. Even minor anomalies can elevate a coin's appeal if they're genuine and recognized. Now here's the question that changes everything. Almost no one. Which means opportunities slip through fingers every single day. Think about that. That's the gap. That's where possibility lives. Because the value isn't just in the coin, it's in the awareness. And once you start looking, you can't unsee it. Every coin becomes a question. Every date becomes a clue. Every detail becomes a potential discovery. Now imagine this. You're sorting through spare change. Maybe it's late. Maybe you're just curious. You spot a 1972 nickel and mint mark. You almost toss it aside, but something stops you. You take a closer look. The surface is unusually clean. The details are sharp. There's a subtle doubling in the lettering. Your curiosity turns into focus. You research. You compare. You learn. And suddenly, that 5-cent coin doesn't feel so ordinary anymore. That's how it starts. Not with certainty, but with curiosity. And sometimes, curiosity leads to something real. Now let's be clear. The vast majority of 1972 no-mint marked nickels are common. They're worth face value, maybe a small premium if they're in decent condition. They're different. They stand out. They get noticed. And when they do, collectors pay attention. Because in a world where millions of coins were produced, perfection, and even near perfection, is incredibly rare, and rarity drives demand. Right at the edge of possibility. Not guaranteed riches. Not instant fortune, but awareness, opportunity, and the chance, however small, that something overlooked could be worth far more than expected. And here's the final twist. The people who find valuable coins aren't necessarily experts. They're observers. They're curious. They're willing to pause for just a moment longer than everyone else. But what if I told you that one version of this ordinary-looking coin, a 1973 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, has been whispered about in collector circles for decades, and in its most extraordinary form, could be worth not hundreds, not thousands, but potentially life-changing money, up to $800,000, and beyond in the right condition. That's exactly what makes this story so dangerous to ignore, because somewhere out there, it could still be hiding in plain sight. And it might already be in your possession. Let's start with what everyone thinks they know. The 1973 Jefferson Nickel isn't rare. Millions were produced. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint struck these coins without a mint mark, which was standard practice at the time. So on the surface, a 1973 nickel with no mint mark should be completely ordinary, common, forgettable, worth exactly 5 cents. But here's where things begin to shift, because in the world of coin collecting, rarity isn't always about how many coins were made. It's about how many were made wrong. And that's where this coin starts to reveal its secrets. Hidden within certain 1973 no mint mark nickels are subtle, almost invisible errors. Mistakes so slight that most people would never notice them. But to a trained eye, they're everything. We're talking about off-center strikes that shift the design just enough to throw off symmetry. Die cracks that snake across the surface like lightning frozen in metal. Double dies that create faint ghost images in the lettering. And sometimes, even more dramatic anomalies. Some of these errors are so rare, so elusive, that only a handful have ever been confirmed, which means if another one surfaces, the price doesn't just climb. It explodes. And here's the twist that catches most people off guard. Condition is everything. 2 identical coins, same year, same design, same lack of mint mark, can have wildly different values. One might be worth pocket change. The other, tens of thousands, because of something most people overlook completely. Preservation. A coin that's been circulated for decades gets worn down. Details fade. Edges soften. Its story becomes blurred. But a coin that somehow escaped circulation, that remained untouched, pristine, nearly perfect, that's where collectors start to pay attention. That's where competition begins, and that's where things get serious. There have been reports, whispered, debated, sometimes disputed, of top condition 1973 no mint mark nickels fetching staggering prices. One standout example reportedly reaching as high as $85.77,000 in elite collector discussions. Pause for a moment. That's not a typo. That's the kind of number that turns a casual hobby into an obsession. Absolutely not. And this is where the story becomes even more important, because misunderstanding this could cost you a fortune, or cause you to miss one. Most of these nickels are still just nickels. But the difference between an ordinary coin and an extraordinary one can come down to a single detail. A tiny doubling in the word liberty. A slight misalignment in the portrait of Jefferson. A surface texture that reveals a rare dye state. Or an unusual luster that suggests it was never touched by circulation. These aren't things you notice in passing. They're things you discover when you slow down and look closer than you ever have before. Not glanced at them, not counted them, examine them. Because coins like this don't announce themselves. They don't shine brighter. They don't feel heavier. They sit quietly, blending in, waiting for someone to recognize what they truly are. Now imagine this. You're sorting through an old jar of change. Maybe it's been sitting there for years. Maybe it came from a relative, or a forgotten drawer, or a box in the attic. You pick up a nickel. And mint mark. Nothing unusual at first glance, but something makes you pause. You tilt it under the light, look closer, and suddenly, you notice it. A subtle doubling. A strange alignment. A detail that doesn't match what you've seen before. That moment, right there, is where everything changes, because now, it's no longer just a coin. It's a possibility. And possibilities in this world can be worth everything. Collectors have spent decades chasing coins like this. Not just for the money, but for the thrill of discovery. The idea that something overlooked, something dismissed, could turn out to be extraordinary. It's not just about wealth. It's about the hunt. And here's the part most people don't realize. Some of the most valuable coins ever discovered weren't found in vaults or museums. They were found in circulation. In everyday change. In places no one thought to look twice. Which means the next great discovery might not require a plane ticket, or an auction paddle, or a six-figure investment. It might require nothing more than curiosity and attention. Start with the basics. Check the date, 1973. Look for the absence of a mint mark. That's your starting point. Then, examine the details. Study the lettering. Look for doubling or irregular spacing. Check the surface for unusual marks that don't look like damage, but like something that happened during the minting process. And most importantly, assess the condition, because the closer it is to perfection, the higher the stakes. But here's the final twist. Even experts don't always agree. Coin grading can be subjective. Values can fluctuate. Markets can shift, which means the true value of a coin isn't just in what it is, it's in who wants it, and how badly. And when a rare error meets a determined collector, that's when records get broken. That's when headlines get written. That's when an ordinary nickel becomes something unforgettable. So, the next time you come across a 1973 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, don't dismiss it. Don't spend it. Don't assume it's nothing. Because hidden within that small piece of metal could be a story waiting to unfold. A mistake that became a treasure. A detail that changed everything. A discovery that turns 5 cents into a fortune. A plain, ordinary Jefferson nickel. Dated 1974. And oh, silver shine. No commemorative design. No obvious mistake. Just 5 cents. Because hidden among millions of these everyday coins lies a version so mysterious, so misunderstood, that collectors have whispered about it for decades. A version that, under the right conditions, has been linked to jaw-dropping valuations and reported sales approaching an astonishing $937,000. Yes. For a nickel. So here's the question you weren't expecting today. The year is 1974. America is in the middle of economic uncertainty. Inflation is rising. The mint is producing coins in massive quantities to keep up with demand. Billions of nickels are struck in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Now here's where things get interesting. Most people don't realize this, but not all mint marks are created equal. In fact, in 1974, the absence of a mint mark wasn't unusual. It was expected. For coins struck in Philadelphia. So at first glance, a 1974 nickel with no mint mark seems completely normal, common, forgettable. But collectors who've spent decades studying minting anomalies will tell you something very different. Because within that normal category, there are outliers. And those outliers are where the real story begins. You see, during high-speed coin production, mistakes happen. Dies wear down. Metal shifts. Pressure fluctuates. And sometimes, just sometimes, the result is a coin that looks ordinary to the untrained eye, but contains subtle, almost invisible irregularities that transform it into something extraordinary. Take a closer look. Now imagine a version where those features look slightly off. A little thicker. A little doubled. A little wrong. That's not damage. That's not wear. That could be a double die error. And if you're wondering whether that matters, it matters more than you think, because double dies are among the most sought-after errors in coin collecting. They're not random scratches or post-mint damage. They originate during the die creation process itself, meaning every coin struck from that die carries the same hidden flaw. In other words, they're born rare. But here's where the tension rises. Not all double dies are obvious. In fact, many are so subtle that they go unnoticed for decades. Passed from hand to hand, pocket to pocket, cash register to coin jar, hidden in plain sight. And the 1974 no-mint marked Jefferson nickel? It has been linked to several reported varieties with doubling, die deterioration, and unusual strike characteristics that collectors continue to debate to this day. Some show faint doubling in the word Liberty. Others reveal distortion in the date itself, 1974, where the numbers seem to echo ever so slightly. And then, there are the more elusive examples, coins with exceptional strike quality, razor-sharp details, mirror-like surfaces. Specimens so pristine that they defy the expectations of mass production. These are the ones that change everything. Because condition is king. Let me say that again. Condition is everything. Now you're in a completely different world. Collectors use a grading scale that goes all the way up to MS-70, mint state perfection. And while very few coins ever reach that level, even approaching the upper tiers, MS-66, MS-67, MS-68, can send values skyrocketing. Because survival at that level is rare. Think about it. These coins were never meant to be saved. They were meant to be spent. Tossed into drawers. Dropped on sidewalks. Rolled into bank wrappers. Finding one in near-perfect condition today is like finding a time capsule that somehow escaped the chaos of everyday life. And when rarity meets demand, prices can explode. Over the years, there have been reports, carefully documented within collector circles, of exceptional 1974 no-mint mark nickels reaching staggering valuations. While not every claim is verified in mainstream auctions, whispers of high-end private sales and elite-grade specimens have pushed perceived values into the hundreds of thousands. And yes, even figures approaching $937,000 have been associated with top-condition, highly scrutinized examples under specific circumstances. Not quite, because in the world of rare coins, value isn't just about metal. It's about story. It's about scarcity. It's about the moment someone realizes, this shouldn't exist like this. And that realization can turn pocket change into a life-changing discovery. Now here's the twist most people never see coming. The majority of these potentially valuable nickels aren't locked away in vaults. They're still out there, circulating, hiding, waiting. Because most people don't check. They assume a nickel is just a nickel. They don't examine the date closely. They don't inspect the lettering. They don't tilt the coin under light to catch subtle doubling or unusual luster. And that's exactly why opportunities like this still exist. So let me ask you something. Not glanced, not counted, looked, because the difference between 5 cents and a potential fortune could come down to a few overlooked details. A slight doubling. An unusually sharp strike. A coin that just feels different. And here's the part that separates dreamers from discoverers. Action. You don't need expensive equipment to start. A simple magnifying glass can reveal more than you'd expect. A basic understanding of what to look for can transform how you see every coin that passes through your hands. And once you start noticing these details, you can't unsee them. Every nickel becomes a question. Every date becomes a possibility. Every pocketful of change becomes a treasure hunt. Because somewhere out there, maybe in a jar, a drawer, or even your wallet, a 1974 Jefferson Nickel is waiting to be rediscovered. Not because it looks extraordinary at first glance, but because it isn't. And that's the beauty of it. The most valuable opportunities in life rarely announce themselves. They hide inside the ordinary. They blend in. They wait for someone curious enough to take a second look. And in 1975, something happened at the U.S. Mint that still fuels one of the most persistent and electrifying rumors in coin collecting history. A Jefferson Nickel. An no-mint mark. And whispers of value soaring into the hundreds of thousands, even millions. Because here's the twist. 1975 nickels without a mint mark do exist. In fact, millions of them were made. That's where the story gets interesting. In 1975, the Philadelphia Mint struck Jefferson Nickels without mint marks. That was standard practice at the time. Philadelphia coins simply didn't carry a P. So on the surface, a 1975 nickel with no mint mark is completely normal, completely ordinary. And yet, the market tells a different story. Because within those millions of coins lies a razor-thin margin for error. And in coin collecting, errors aren't mistakes. They're opportunities. Rare, unpredictable, and sometimes shockingly valuable opportunities. The question isn't whether a 1975 no-mint mark nickel exists. because hidden among the ordinary are coins that break the rules. Coins with subtle doubling in the lettering, so faint you might miss it unless you know exactly where to look. Coins struck off center, where Jefferson's portrait drifts just slightly out of alignment, creating a visual distortion that collectors obsess over. Coins with die cracks, thin, jagged lines, running across the surface like lightning frozen in metal. And then, there are the ones that make seasoned collectors stop in their tracks, full steps nickels. But on the reverse of the Jefferson nickel, beneath Monticello, are a series of tiny steps. Most coins from circulation show wear, flattening those steps into a blur. But in rare cases, very rare cases, the steps remain fully defined, sharp, and uninterrupted. 6 clean, distinct steps. That's what collectors call a full steps nickel. And when you combine a 1975 no-mint marked nickel with pristine condition and full steps detail, the value doesn't just rise. It explodes. We're not talking about pocket change anymore. We're talking about coins that have sold for thousands, tens of thousands, and in the most extreme, high-grade cases, pushing toward staggering numbers that sound almost fictional. Figures like $797,000 get thrown around, and while those top-tier sales often involve extraordinary grading conditions and market dynamics, they reveal something deeper: demand, obsession. A relentless hunt for perfection in something most people overlook. Condition is everything. 2 identical 1975 nickels, same year, same design, same lack of mint mark, can have completely different destinies. 1 ends up in a parking meter, the other ends up in a collector's vault, because one has microscopic wear, and the other is flawless. Graded coins, those evaluated and sealed by professional services, can reach astronomical prices if they achieve near-perfect scores. We're talking about grades like MS67, MS68, or higher. At that level, even the tiniest imperfection can mean the difference between a $50 coin and a 5-figure one. Now pause for a moment. That's the unsettling part, because rare coins don't announce themselves. They don't shine brighter. They don't feel heavier. They blend in, quietly, patiently, waiting for someone to notice what everyone else ignored. And the 1975 no-mint marked nickel sits right at the center of that mystery. Not because every single one is valuable, but because a few of them might be, and those few are enough to keep collectors searching, checking, flipping coins under magnification, chasing that one unexpected detail. A slightly thicker letter. A faint doubling in Liberty. An unusually sharp strike. Or steps so crisp they look carved yesterday. It's a game of inches, of awareness, of timing, and sometimes of luck. But here's where things take another turn. The idea of a $1 million nickel isn't just about the coin itself. It's about what it represents. A chance. A possibility. The idea that something overlooked, something dismissed as ordinary, could quietly hold extraordinary value. That's why stories like this spread. That's why collectors keep looking. Because every once in a while, the impossible gets just close enough to feel real. And when it does, it changes how you see everything. You start checking your change. You slow down before spending that nickel. And suddenly, that jar of coins on your dresser doesn't look so ordinary anymore. It looks like potential. Because history has shown, again and again, that valuable coins don't always start in collections. They start in circulation. They pass through gas stations, grocery stores, vending machines. They live ordinary lives until someone recognizes them. And that moment, that split second of realization, is what turns 5 cents into something far more powerful. Not just money. Opportunity. So here's the real takeaway. The 1975 no-mint marked Jefferson Nickel isn't rare because of its absence of a mint mark. It's rare because of what might be hiding within it. Errors, condition, details so small they escape the casual eye. But not yours. Not anymore. Because now you know what to look for. Now you understand that value isn't always obvious. And now, every coin you touch carries a new question. The next time you get change, don't rush. Look closer. Turn the coin. Study the details. Because somewhere out there, maybe closer than you think, is a 1975 nickel that defies expectations. A coin that slipped past quality control. A coin that collectors would fight to own. A coin that could turn a routine moment into something unforgettable.